Good morning, YouTube. Hope you guys are doing well. And I want to do something a little different today. I've never done something like this on my channel. And it's sort of connected to what we do with sync licensing, obviously, as we do try to get our music into major films and cinema. Not all of us, obviously. I've only had one of my tracks in my entire 15-year career in a major motion picture, and that was Let's Be Cops. Not necessarily an award-winning film, but still grateful that I had my music in it. But it's still connected to what we do here. So even if you're not particularly interested in this stuff in terms of sync licensing, maybe you find my review interesting, and just a movie review might be helpful for you in terms of deciding what you want to go see at the movies if you haven't been to the movies in a long time, which is kind of one of the main reasons why I've, obviously seen a few movies in the last couple of years, but this was the first movie that I actually went to the theater and watched and paid the money to go to the theater and watch. And I have to say, I am extremely pleasantly thrilled and surprised with what I saw on screen and what was going on in this movie. So we're going to wait for just a few minutes here to see if a couple of you guys want to jump in and chime in here. And of course, if you guys have any insights, opinions, or thoughts on this, feel free to pop them in the chat. Would love to hear from you too. Don't worry, there will be no spoilers. I know many of you guys have probably not seen this movie yet, and maybe you've been seeing or hearing some good things about it. Not only do I think this is an amazing movie, I think just historically, this is a meaningful movie in that it can do two things. One, it can give Hollywood a big, massive slap in the face, which is what it needs so bad right now. Hollywood is messing up so bad, and they don't know what they're doing. They've lost their focus. They've lost what's important, and they literally have been treating the consumers, you and I, like idiots for the last many, many years, and thinking that we just want big explosions and massive CGI and amazing visual spectacles, and that's all we really care about. And story and characters and development and emotional payoffs, and that's a side thought. That's an afterthought. We really just want to make sure that we're delivering just massive explosions and big, crazy stuff. This movie has all that in it. Okay, it's obviously a Godzilla movie, so you're not going to be disappointed. You will see a massive monster destroying property, stomping on people, leveling buildings, creating atomic blasts. It'll do all the things that you maybe want it to do, especially if you're a Godzilla fan. I'm not a massive Godzilla fan, but I actually did like the 97 movie, and that's probably because I was huge into dinosaurs at the time, and they sort of crafted that Godzilla movie after Jurassic Park because that was such a hit. So obviously they crafted their Godzilla to look a little bit more like a T-Rex. I know that movie gets a lot of hate. I actually still like it. I probably just because I grew up with it, and it was just, I loved big monsters, big dinosaurs. So what's not to love, right? As however old I was, I guess I was 14, 13, something like that. So what I want to do, though, in this little review I'm going to do is just walk you guys through why this movie I think is so important, what it did well, what I think Hollywood needs to learn, and why I actually am now, I think the biggest theme is that I'm more hopeful now about movies and movie theaters and cinema as an art form. And it's something that I needed because I have just been consistently disappointed time after time, even before COVID, going to the theater over and over again. I remember the last movie that I watched was Ready Player One. I think it was one of the last ones I watched, where I remember going to the theater and going, this is going to be amazing. Virtual reality, I mean, it's right up my alley. I love VR. This is such a cool concept for a movie. I can't wait to see what happens. And I remember being bored halfway into the movie, maybe even a third into the movie, thinking, visually, yeah, it's bright and colorful, saturation that's turned up to 10, amazing, sparkles. Like if I were a cat, this would be such a great thing to be looking at. But I do have a human heart. I have a human emotion. I do have a feeling for wanting to be connected to the story and connected to the characters. And all I was being offered in that movie and many other movies is like one-dimensional characters that were not really growing or developing or going in any direction, and there was no sympathy or there was no care or thought into making us invested, the audience invested in the people and the characters that were in these movies. And I think that's what Godzilla reinvented and put back into their movie, especially this being a sort of big, grand spectacle, blockbuster type movie. Of course, there's tons of indie movies, smaller movies that are only focused on the drama, only focused on the characters. You can get plenty of that. But since Hollywood and a lot of these major studios need to have sort of broad appeal to have their movies really go out of the park and make over $1 billion, it can still be possible. And that's what I got like hopeful about. I said, I think up until now, how many reinventions of all these Marvel characters and Spider-Man and Batman, and how many more can we do before we're just sort of like, okay, let's move on with some more creative ideas. Well, I think we can still do a lot of these reboots and these kind of reinventions and sequels, but we need to do it the way that Godzilla -1 did it. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about. So gave me hope. Really excited about that. The first thing you guys need to know about this movie, if you were not aware, it was made for only $15 million. So if you don't know much about movie budgets, I think the Indiana Jones movie that came out in early summer was like $250 million. Okay. I think Disney's Wish movie that just came out was somewhere around $200 million, maybe a little bit less than that. The Marvels that came out, which has completely flopped and didn't do anything, was made for, I think, around the same $200 million, somewhere around there. Okay. So 150, 200 million, $250 million. That's where these major, especially Disney studios, are at with their budgets. That's way up here. Godzilla -1, 15 million, basically a tenth, right, of what these major studios are doing. Also, you need to know that this movie was not made in Hollywood. This was made in Japan. So I'm not familiar with the studio or the director or anybody. I really want to do some research and to find out how they made this movie, because when you watch this movie, you will not think you're watching a $15 million movie. You probably think, well, $15 million for a Godzilla movie, what is it going to be, like a cardboard cutout piece of paper with Godzilla moving across the screen? Like, this is going to look terrible. It looks like at least $100 million to me. Okay, I'm no, cinemaphile and know all the specialties or the ins and outs of CGI, but like, he looks believable enough to me. He looks terrifying enough to me. You'll see some little moments where like he's going through the water and the water CGI looks a little bit, not the best sort of water emulation you could do. But again, Hollywood, please pay attention here. That doesn't matter, okay? I didn't walk out of there going, I loved everything about this movie, but man, that water looked a little fake in that one scene. I'm not that interested in this movie. I'm not going to tell other people to watch it. No, that really actually doesn't matter. Okay, so the little bits of maybe they didn't have all the amazing top of the line CGI effects. I think they actually, and I'm maybe just emphasizing that. I think when Godzilla shows up and destroys stuff, it feels like a major $100-200 million Hollywood blockbuster. You will not know the difference. Okay, so don't worry about that. You will get your money's worth in terms of it feeling terrifying and loud and intense. It gives you all those payoffs for the monster and all the CGI that's there. Okay, now, what this movie did, though, which I think is the kind of cool little it's a tricky thing that it did, a little bit of a sort of a bait and switch, but in the right way, is it's a movie about Godzilla, right? You'd think so. It's called Godzilla -1. So you go into this movie, and I went into this movie going like, I just love to see some massive monster destroying stuff, and I want to see a spectacle, and it'd be kind of just a fun ride escape for me to go, have a fun time, right? Well, when you get into the movie, and as you start to really watch it and understand what's going on with the characters, you realize maybe about halfway or maybe 2/3 through the movie that this movie is not about Godzilla at all. Godzilla is there, and he gets plenty of screen time, so you're not going to feel like you got cheated or something like that. But he's not there like all the time as this menacing force that everybody's always just focused on and thinking about, right? He's definitely playing a certain role. But in some ways, this is how I took the film. I felt like Godzilla just had to be inserted into this movie in order to tell the story of the human beings. Like, if the movie was just released as a sort of indie drama about the human beings, by the way, it's set post-World War II, right after the war, right after Japan had been bombed and was sort of rebuilding, and people, and don't worry, no spoilers are going to become, I'm just sort of setting the stage for how the movie's, like, where things happen, how things are happening. But you're basically following these characters rebuild their lives after trauma, after war, after losing family members, after a lot of just sad, depressing things happening, okay? So that's basically where the story starts. Now, Godzilla gets inflicted into these characters' lives in various ways, and so obviously the excitement and the intensity of all that is happening. But it's not really what you're interested in. You're actually getting, as the director and as the writing sort of unveils itself, you actually get more interested in these people and how they're going to develop and how they're struggling with whatever they're struggling with, and are they going to be able to grow? And you actually, in some ways, for me, I kind of dislike the main character in the first half of the movie. I was like, man, you are not my kind of guy. I do not like this kind of a guy. And I thought he was like this kind of whiny character. And I was like, man, I'm not really liking you. And that was done, I think, obviously on purpose, because as you're following the storyline, you start to see this character become a little bit less and less and less unlikable till, of course, the very end, where he has more of a triumphant sort of resolve, okay? So the one thing this movie did is it just took its time. Okay, it wasn't rushing me through the story. What I find with a lot of Hollywood movies is it feels like you're watching a trailer, like a 2-hour trailer. This scene is 15 seconds. This scene is 5 seconds, and it's just nothing but moving you through the story. And it's not really feeling it's well written. It's almost all being shoehorned together to be like, well, we have to go from A to B. So how do we get that? Okay, well, this character is going to explain, almost like they're looking right at the camera and going, this is what the plot point is right now. We need to get over here, so this is where we're going to go. Like literally treating us like idiots. Like that's what it feels like for a lot of these main Hollywood movies. This movie didn't do that. It was very well written out. And even though the dialogue and the conversation going on between the characters obviously moves the plot forward, it wasn't done in this sort of obvious dummy, with a hammer hitting you over the head with it, okay? It was really, really cool how they kind of did that just elegantly and just very... I don't know, just at a high level of writing. It was just really, really well done. But also what I loved about it is we didn't rush through scenes, okay? So if we were with a character and we were supposed to really get to know them and understand what they were struggling with and what they were dealing with so that we can get emotionally invested in them, key word here, we didn't rush through the scenes. In fact, sometimes I was feeling like, okay, let's move on to the next one because I realized I'm so conditioned now for all these movies that we need to just be moving quickly. And then I was just catching myself going, no, like that's Hollywood thinking that we have no attention span. So they're just increasing the speed of their pacing, of their editing, right? And this movie was just taking its time. You would just hang out in the room with these characters talking and conversating. And I realized that's what's been missing from a lot of movies lately is us just hanging out with them in a room or on a city street or in a car or whatever, and just being with them for a few minutes. It really helps us feel much more connected to them, and it doesn't feel like we're just constantly just being fed plot points along the way. So it took its time, even though there are some fast-paced scenes in this movie where it feels like it's intense and there's explosions and all that crazy stuff. Obviously, as Godzilla shows up, there's plenty of slow pacing and beautifully elegant scenes that are just edited well, and it's just not rushing you through it. It's just letting you, it's like drawing you into it. I think what Hollywood assumes is because all of our attention spans are much shorter now thanks to social media, that it has to just keep the pace going. Well, if your characters are not interesting or the scene you're setting or the dialogue sucks, yeah, we're going to get bored with you kind of sitting in a room with two characters just talking for a couple of minutes because the content's not there to pull us in. But this movie had the content. It had great dialogue. It had great characters. It had great just backstory to all of them, so you can kind of really empathize with them about what they're doing. But you felt something towards them. You felt sympathy for them. You felt anger towards them. You felt disgust towards them. Whatever you felt, they were definitely evoking those emotions in these scenes. So you felt like, okay, I don't feel like we need to rush through this. I like hanging out with these characters so I can kind of get to know them a little bit better. Next, what I noticed is there were very clear familial characters, so family-based archetypes or characters that were in this movie. There was a clear mom that you could identify with, okay? There was a clear brother. There was a kind of a crazy uncle who ended up becoming really, really intelligent and wise and was looking out for his nephew. There was a dad figure who was very protective of his son, who was not letting his son do dangerous things, even though the son was very wanting to participate in some dangerous activities and in some ways disobeyed him, but having that payoff in the end. So, and there was obviously a daughter, there was a sister, there was an aunt, there was all these different kind of family archetypes that as you look at these characters, and I think the casting was obviously the biggest win for this movie, as you looked at these characters, you could just see that's an uncle. That's the dad, that's the son, that's, obviously the protagonist, the main character. You could just see these kind of old archetypes, these very familial archetypes in these characters. So I felt a personal connection to each one of them because obviously I'm inserting my relationship with my mom, with my dad, with my brother, with my uncle, with all that kind of stuff into these characters. And that's what makes it accessible for me. And that's what made my heart like literally come to life in this movie, and I actually felt emotionally connected to everything that was going on in this movie. So I haven't really felt that with a lot of Hollywood movies lately. They have not been really staying true to some of these archetypes that are sort of like universal and that people can really connect to and relate to. And I talked about how the monster wasn't the main focus. The monster was basically there just to pull away, or I guess pull you in to the movie theater. But as you got into it, you realized this movie, what it was really about was about family. It was really about redemption. It was about self-forgiveness. It was about grace. It was about forgiving others. It was about building a family and connecting new family when your previous family has been destroyed, and learning how to grow and to become more confident in yourself, and how to learn how to essentially like live again after feeling completely defeated in life. Those are heavy topics. Those are extremely heavy topics. And if this wasn't an indie film that was basically just a drama, I don't think a lot of people would go to it to like get those messages out of it. But you throw a massive, huge blockbuster Godzilla monster in it, and people are going to it going, I'm along for the ride. And you realize at the end of it, you're like, wow, they really got me there in a good way, because I was entertained. I was on the edge of my seat. I felt my heart rate increase with those scenes. But really at the end of it, like the real payoff for me was like the great redemption, like forgiveness. Like one of the moments at the very end, again, I won't spoil it, but there's a moment of forgiveness and grace at the very end that just completely like got me like teary-eyed basically. And I could just feel my heart swelling up, and it was like, whoa, you guys got me with that one. You really, really got me with that one. And so as I'm walking out of there, all I want to do is tell everybody to watch this movie. So I'm walking out and I'm talking to the people that are checking the tickets. I'm like, have you guys seen this Godzilla movie? They're like, oh, not yet. I'm like, you need to go see it. Of all the movies that you guys got in here, that's the winner right there. I mean, I haven't seen any of the other movies, of course. So, but ignorant opinion of mine, but I just told them, you're going to love it. It's definitely going to be worth your time to go check it out. I don't know if movie theater employees get free viewings. I'm imagining they do as a little bit of the perk. So, and that's what inspired me to make this video, to tell all of you guys, if you haven't seen it, go to the movies, go check it out, go buy the ticket. I just did a matinee. It was like $8, whatever it was. I bought a little medium popcorn. Support your little local theater and support a movie maker, to me, that's doing it right. Because I hope if this movie really does well, and I think it's already profitable. I think it's made like in the States 40 million or something like that. But I think it was already released in Japan. In Japan, I think it's already broke even or made a profit over there. So I think anything that it makes here in the States is just profit. So it may or may not get up to 100 million or something crazy like that. But just seeing a small budget movie with you know, the right writing, the right characters, the right casting, and with very efficient CGI. That's where I think this is going to be a revolutionary film, because these Hollywood studios have been spending $100-200 million on pure CGI based movies. So they got to all be looking at this movie going like, how did they do that for 15 million? I'm curious. How did you guys make it look that good for just 15 million? So I think a lot of this has to do with technology. There's probably some new technological advances that these Japanese studios and CGI factories are using that are sort of expediting some of this. Probably a lot of it has to do with AI, I'm guessing, that helps them sort of fill in some of the gaps for things that maybe they didn't before. I don't know. This is my guess. But whatever they're doing, Hollywood, you should put down the pen for your own scripts, turn down your computers, and go take notes, because Japan's doing it right now. Just to be honest, like Japan is actually doing this correctly. And when you have a budget at $15 million, you don't need your movie to break $1 billion for it to be profitable. That's where we're at right now with these crazy, ridiculous budgets. And I think that's what's also making a lot of these movies just feel very watered down and bland, and like, we don't want to offend anybody, so it's going to be very, very blah, right? It just has no character or personality. You can tell that there wasn't a single writer or director that had a clear vision for what story they want to tell. You can kind of feel that these movies are made by committees, and they're having to run through a bureaucratic line of people that are just offering edits and revisions and all this nonsense. And that's why it always feels very vague and unclear and just not compelling at all, because they're so worried that not everybody's going to really enjoy this. Well, not everybody has to enjoy a movie. Not everybody has to enjoy a Godzilla movie for it to be profitable and make money for the studio and incentivize them, to make more movies like that. So I really hope that that's something that really I don't know, just wakes Hollywood up into a way where they can reduce their budgets, they can figure out how to be more efficient with their CGI and what they're doing. I'm not saying like never use CGI. They use CGI very effectively in this movie, but don't think that because you need your water CGI effects to look just like real water, and that's what's really important to theater goers. It's not. We really don't care about that. I just watched this movie, and I'll tell you, it's not what's getting me to get on my camera and to tell everybody else I know to go watch this movie. It was the emotional payoff. It was the emotional connection. It was the characters. It was the writing, and probably the fact that this did not have to go through so many different layers of bureaucracy and committees to get released. It just was a singular vision, or maybe a couple of people's vision, and that's why it's blowing up. That's why it's doing well. That's why it's basically spreading word of mouth here. There's obviously some advertising going on, but basically what you're seeing online for why this movie is doing really well is people on social media and through their friends are just telling each other, go check out this movie. And that's what I'm doing here as well. And it got me. So it worked. So Hollywood, hopefully you guys wake up. Hopefully you guys are paying attention to this kind of thing, because I do, after I got out of this movie, this was my last point, and then I'll jump off here today. Just a quick stream today. You know, up until this movie, I was thinking, you know, movies are probably just an art form that's past its date. Like maybe that was a 20th century art form. And as we move into the 21st century with social media and the internet, like movies just aren't really there for us anymore. It's just not going to be a useful art form that people are interested in. And we're just kind of seeing it sort of die off, because you see a lot of these blockbuster flops and you think, yeah, it's just not something we're into anymore. I'm second guessing that, because the experience I had makes me want to go back to the movie. Like that emotional payoff and that like warmth in my heart and that feeling of like excitement at the end of the movie, probably could only get that intensely from the theater. I probably could have watched that movie at home. I don't know if I would have had that intense feeling, because it's just a massive screen, seeing a big, you know, monster, the loud audio, the amazing audio that you're hearing in this theater. You know, it definitely makes a difference in terms of your emotional investment into a movie like that. And that makes me want to go to the theater more often, because I loved the experience I had, and it was worth my about $20 I spent to go there. So I think there is a future for movies, but it's not going to go the way that Hollywood has been going, and it's going to have to take a whole new, unique direction. This was something that I was kind of predicting and hoping for as the writers and Hollywood actors strike was going on. I said, well, if this is going to go on forever, which it hasn't, they've obviously resolved them both, but if this is going to be something that we have to worry about or contend with, maybe this could be the dawn of an era of indie films using a lot of this technology to release amazing high-quality movies that can actually start taking chances again, getting into some creative new ideas, developing new characters, new archetypes, all that kind of stuff, and not having to constantly reboot stuff. And yes, I know this is another Godzilla reboot, but trust me, they did it well. I'm not the only one that thinks this. I haven't watched tons of Godzilla movies. In fact, I think the only other one I saw was the '97 one, which was definitely not one of the originals. But I think a lot of other people I've been hearing review this movie are saying this is the Godzilla movie. Like it's probably, if not the first, probably the second best one that has ever been released ever. So it's that good. So you guys should definitely check it out. But I feel like there could be a hope for these independent studios or international studios like this one from Japan to market their movies into the US, or to release movies where they can keep their budgets reasonable and under control, and they don't have to go through tons and tons of committees, because they don't have to have a movie that makes $500 or $1 billion to be profitable. They can actually do really well with this movie, which has only made 40 million here in the States, and I think it'll climb up pretty quickly. It'll continue to climb. But this is a studio that can easily call this a massive win for their tiny $15 million budget, and that's what we kind of need to get back to. I think it's more sensible budgets and sensible storytelling and character development and all the things that I talked about in this review. So thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a comment below. What do you guys think about this? This is definitely not something that I'll do all the time, but it's relevant. Sync licensing, music, movies, cinema, it's kind of all in our world. So I figured it would be something that some of you might have been interested in. So I appreciate you guys tuning in live here. And if you're watching this afterwards, love to hear your thoughts. If you saw the movie, what did you think? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if I convinced you, maybe go see the movie, I'd love to hear that too. I think you're going to love it. I think it's going to be worth your time and money. So, all right, I'm out of here. You guys get back to your days. Hope you have a good one, and we'll talk to you all very soon.